guys, welcome back to Holistic Christian Prayer. I'm Nicholas, your host. I have ADHD and a whole lot to say most of the time. And that's actually why you're getting this bonus episode right now. Unbeknownst to you guys, I had to cut the first episode a little short in the interest of keeping with the episode within certain time limits. I intend to keep these episodes fairly short for those who vibe with the ADHD tribe, and also so that you don't feel like you're listening to a whole book in one sitting. So starting with the next episode, I will begin releasing episodes every other week. I know that's kind of a long wait between episodes, but I hope you'll stick around. I do hope to switch to weekly podcasts in the near future, but I want to make sure that I could deliver on that before I promise it to you. I want to deliver for you guys. That's the point. Anyways, I had to leave something out that I'm sure at least someone out there might be wondering about. You might have noticed that this podcast is called Holistic Christian Prayer. And no, that wasn't a typo. I did mean to spell it that way. It's kind of a play on words, holy, holistic. Yeah, no, kind of lame, but that's kind of my thing. Anyways, I like to explain why this podcast is called Holistic Christian Prayer before we get into the main discussion, about prayer. Understanding why I chose this name will help you better make sense of the driving theme throughout this podcast. So, maybe it's best to start with an example you might have heard of already. Holistic medicine. Holistic medicine is an approach to improve health and wellness in the body, mind, and soul by considering the whole person. In other words, all aspects or components of a person's life are factored into the selection of an appropriate method of treatment. Things like their type of occupation, their day-to-day schedule, stress levels, hobbies, habits, known medical conditions, genetics, psychology, and beliefs are all considered important in finding an effective method of treatment for the individual. Basically, holistic medicine believes that people are not just made up of their various parts, but how those various parts, both physical and non-physical, work or don't work together. I believe that prayer needs to be approached in much the same way. That is, in a holistic way. I believe this in part because I know that when I've treated prayer as something separate and distinct from all the other factors in my life, I frequently misdiagnosed what was going wrong in my prayers and my relationship with God. I started to figure out kind of like late in the game that it was actually the things that I was leaving out of prayer that I was secretly hoping would change the most. The things from my past that were hurtful, they didn't make their way into my prayers. The day-to-day stress or things that were just bothering me as I was going about my day, I didn't factor into my prayers. I just didn't involve them in my prayers. But I realized that I secretly on the inside, I wanted help with all those things. And I just kind of sat there and I kind of felt a little bit negative about prayer in general because I'm like, this isn't doing anything. But only if I had realized I was not bringing into prayer the things that I was secretly hoping, despite not praying for it, that those things would somehow change. Kind of weird. But anyway, when I began taking into account all that was going on in my life and saw those things as potentially influencing my prayer life, everything started changing for me. Shortly after I began doing this, I also saw in hindsight that there were many things that I chose not to pray about. I just didn't see those things really as being necessary or necessitating prayer or something that was worth taking the effort to pray over. I mean, am I really going to pray over like a lost quarter or something like that? Well, maybe if I'm at like a parking meter and I really need that quarter. But a few things I just flat out didn't believe God would help with, even if I asked. And that's an interesting topic that we will talk about later in future episodes. I'm looking forward to that one. Eventually, however, I did become convinced that prayer is for all areas of life at all times, and it could do far more than I imagined, including finding lost quarters. I think that all of these shifts started when I took on the same approach I used in trying to get my ADHD under control. With ADHD, everything is potentially relevant to the areas of struggle, so it became necessary to be more self-aware. I'm not saying everything is actually relevant, it has the potential to be relevant. So I couldn't rule things out. Managing ADHD is all about awareness, a lot of personal honesty, and eliminating specific distractions for specific tasks, knowing what's easy and what's hard for you personally, and then developing strategies to achieve your goals with all those things in mind. When we're looking to begin or improve the quality of our prayer life, I believe we need to look at all the factors in our life. And I'm not saying you need to be aware of every single factor or know yourself in some sort of deep or mysterious or complete way. The goal is simply to be aware of as much as possible and work with what you know. Let me provide you an example with what I mean. Trigger warning, if nobody likes dentists, you probably should skip this next part. Suppose that someone keeps developing cavities in their teeth despite brushing and flossing regularly. It would not only be inaccurate, but also emotionally damaging to the person who develops those cavities to suggest to them that the reason their teeth have cavities is due to infrequent brushing. But a good dentist wouldn't do that. Good dentists will ask about hygiene habits, known medical conditions, and diet choices to determine the true cause of the cavities. If we're only considering the brushing habits while ignoring the other relevant factors, the treatment can make existing symptoms worse while creating new ones. After all, bleeding gums can be caused by infrequent brushing as well as brushing too hard. When it comes to prayer, we tend to behave a little bit like a bad spiritual dentist. We look at one or two factors, ignore all the others, and apply a treatment that may worsen our situation rather than making it better. Sometimes our treatments for spiritual issues can create unwanted side effects, just like medicines that we treat the body with. And it's kind of unique to prayer, but there's a couple times when we will regularly suspect things as being the culprit for what's causing our prayers to either go unanswered or for our prayer life to suffer in some way. We kind of have like our common suspects, the ones that we look at with squinty eyes. And while it might be true that most of the time those are actually the culprits, those are actually the things that are causing our prayer life to go a little haywire, or for things not to go so smoothly or to be less than enjoyable, we can't look at those exclusively and pretend like those are the only potentially relevant factors. Those are the only things going on in our life that could be a part of the issues that we're facing in our prayer. So listen, guys, prayer isn't just for Sundays. It's not just for the quote-unquote prayer warriors, and it's not just for a limited set of issues. It's not, pray for, good health and, maybe for, good relationships with people or for you to get along with so-and-so. Those are kind of like typical church-approved, pastor-approved list of items that, you're supposed to be praying about, pray for Timmy because, he's kind of like walking away from the Lord kind of thing, or we don't really know about Tom. I want to get this across to you guys as strongly as I possibly can. Prayer isn't just for Sundays. It's not just for the quote-unquote prayer warriors, and it's not just for a limited set of issues. Our prayer lives don't go unaffected by everything else that goes on in our life. It all matters to varying degrees. I've noticed there's a tendency for us to compartmentalize our prayer life from other areas of our life, such as work, family, finances, hobbies, politics, social life, love life, and the like. I have a theory actually on why we do that, but that'll come up in later episodes and is one I'm really looking forward to. There's a lot going into in our beliefs, in our psychology, our doctrines, all the little things that make up the decision, really, or what kind of like leads to our decision of what we will or won't pray about, or what's proper or improper to pray about. And that'll be really fun to dig into. But I want to basically say, not for Sundays, not just for the prayer warriors, not just for a couple of small, limited items. Prayer was never meant to be just relegated to a small corner of our life, but to permeate every area of our life. And I can attest to the truth here when I say prayer is most enjoyable when we bring all of who we are to prayer. When we really, truly give God our griefs, our desires, our needs, our worries, and we don't try to hold back a part of ourselves to quote unquote take care of. We don't hold those things back from God as if to say, I got this, I can handle that. or like, I don't need to bring that to God. Like, I've got it. When we start to do that, when we really give God all of those things, all of ourselves in our prayers, we can finally experience the unimaginable power of prayer. So as we learn to pray holistically, we will learn how to feel comfortable in bringing all of who we are to prayer and use all of what we know about God and ourselves to improve our prayer life. So the whole title of this podcast is Holistic Christian Prayer, so that kind of should hint you at the fact that we're going to be looking a lot at Christian prayer as opposed to other prayer practices and other faiths. But we will be discussing Christian prayer from the Christian perspective. But in later episodes, we actually will talk about and even interview people from different faiths. I know that when I say I will be discussing prayer from a Christian perspective, this can mean a lot of different things. For the sake of clarity, I will do my best to differentiate what is common among all or most of the Christian denominations and what is particular to a certain branch of Christianity. I want to go from what is universal about prayer to what is unique to one or more denominations within Christianity. As we will see in later episodes, doctrine has enormous influence over what people believe about prayer, and that has a direct effect on how people experience prayer. And I'm truly, truly excited to get into that because, man, that unpacks a whole lot of stuff. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that too. Now that you guys know that a major theme of this podcast is getting comfortable with bringing our whole selves into our prayer life, as we also seek to make prayer a part of all of our life, you guys are ready to rock. I know! That last line sounded awesome. I wrote it myself. Thanks. What's that? It didn't make sense. Right. Well, that makes sense. It came from me. Look, on this podcast, we bring all of who we are without holding back anything in prayer. No faking and no half measures. No holding back. No saying I've got this, but putting it all into our prayers. Everything that matters to us, all of who we are, everything makes its way in some shape and form into our prayers. And on this podcast, we don't reserve prayer for a short list of items or just for Sunday. We learn to love prayer in all our lives. I'm going to just do a quick prayer for us, and then we're heading out. Dear Father, thank you for just the ability to even have this podcast. Thank you for those who have so far tuned in. And I thank you in advance for everyone who will eventually come to enjoy this podcast and grow a lot from it. Lord, I ask that you keep guiding my mind and my words and how I go about running this podcast. And Lord, I do ask that for my own sake, that you bring people into the discussion, that you bring people who are interested and who want to engage with this topic and with this podcast. So that way they can get to hear more than just one person's voice. Lord, thank you again for everything you've given me so far. Thank you for the insights and the wisdom, the clarification that you've brought. Lord, use this podcast in whatever way brings you glory. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys. Well, join me next week as we start by asking, what is prayer? This has been Holistic Christian Prayer, prayer for the other 6 days.